Pay attention. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know how that just happened. Okay. God just intervened. God wanted this recorded for some reason. Okay. So what I want to do, what I want to start out with today, and it's not, I'll just be honest up front, it's not as organized as I'd like it to be today, but I want to get into the psychology of sales. I want you to understand the sales process, because I think a lot of times the first step is you've got to sort of master the scripts. That's sort of step one. If you don't master the scripts, then you can't, like that's step one of selling. Okay, is we've got to sell based on the sales structure, based on the sales process. Step two is personality selling, where we begin to make adjustments to the personality. Some of us are trying to personality sell different people when we don't have the structure of the process down. Okay, let me back up a second before I get into sort of the deets. Okay, I'm gonna use this quite a bit over the next couple of weeks. This reference, I've used it a couple of times in the past week. And the more that I use it, the more that I think you'll understand how it applies to you. So we've got this bad boy again. And what is this for all the unmuted? All the unmuted. The triad.
Triad.
Right. 3 years ago, we were talking about the unvaxxed. Now we're talking about the the unmuted. Okay. So this is right. This is the triad is our focus, our language, and our physiology. Okay. Language is both internal, and I'm going to be talking about both of these today. Internal, sorry, I'm writing at an angle, and external. External is our scripts, our sales process, our sales structure. I'm going to be talking about that today, but I'm also going to be talking about your internal dialogue as part of your preparation and pre-game, pre-appointment sort of preparation. So how many of you know who Alex Hormozi is? Anybody know who he is? Mylett just had him on his podcast a few weeks ago. He's one of the biggest influencers in the game. Like, he's got unbelievable content. He wrote a book. It's a great book called $100 Million Offers. Here's a takeaway I just want to get started with today out of his book. He says, I'm not playing to win the game. I'm not playing to win the game. Well, if you're not playing to win the game, then what are you playing for? And he describes it as, I'm playing an infinite game, and an infinite game doesn't have an end. In other words, I'm constantly trying to grow myself. I'm constantly trying to grow my skill set. I'm constantly trying to grow my ability to communicate with others, to influence others. I'm constantly trying to grow the size of my business, the number of outlets. I'm constantly trying to grow the volume and distribution of my business. I'm constantly trying to get better. So it's an infinite game. So there's no winning it. But there is a playing in it. There is a competing in it. There is a constant, never-ending improvement to it. So here's my first question for you. And this is, those of you that are going to get the value out of today's talk, I think here's what's going to happen. I think you're going to wind up taking a bunch of notes, and it's going to cause you to reflect on some things. So here's step one. What's your plan right now for getting better? If I right now said, okay, I'm going to call on you right now, and we're going to put you on center screen right now. And we want you to call up out of your journal, out of your business plan, out of your files. We want you to call up right now your plan for personal improvement, your plan for getting better at sales, your plan for personal development now. Do you have a specific plan in place? Or are you just sort of winging it? Well, you know what? I like to listen to these podcasts, or I'm reading a book. Is it just generically you're sort of dabbling at getting better, or do you have a specific plan with a specific thing that you're trying to achieve as a result of your self-improvement, your sales development, your sales skills? So one of the things I'm going to be focused on personally these next few weeks, and I can take you on this journey with me, is mastering the sales process. Hubert Humphrey, the founder of our company, said it's what you learn once you already know it all that really counts. I know when Brooks did a training a couple of weeks ago, and the guy that he had on, I learned a lot. I've been doing this 23 years. I learned a lot from Brooks's presentation. I learned a lot from the product provider's presentation, took a lot of notes. Right now, my focus is mastering the sales process, mastering the scripts, mastering the objections. That's something I want to encourage you to go on this journey with me. Okay, so when we talk about what's the first thing that needs to happen for you to be effective on your ASAP presentation, for you to be effective on your one-page presentation, for you to be effective on your data collect, for you to be effective on your close, for you to be effective on your one-on-one recruiting appointment or your fast start appointment, what do I need to make sure I've got in place before the appointment starts? Happens before you get on the Zoom, before you get on the appointment. What are the two states that are most important for you to be in control of before you start that appointment? One is certainty. The person who is the most certain will ultimately influence the person who has doubts. So your level of certainty is going to make a tremendous difference. The second is clarity. You can be super certain, but if you can't keep things clear and simple where the prospect can follow you, all the certainty in the world's not going to help you if you don't have a specific sales process, if you're not following steps, if you don't have a sales structure or a structure to your appointment or to your presentation. If you're just sort of rambling and all over the place, but super certain, it's going to be really hard for you to get where you want to go to. Can I give you an example? Who wants an example? I can't see anybody right now, which bums me out. Who wants an example?
Yeah.
Give it.
I do.
Bring it.
Here's where some of us struggle. We hear it Nate Ireton or Nikki Cannon or Brooks Sternberg or Stephanie Hicks or Natalie Plant or Dan or Lauren Stein, and they go through a situation they had with a recruit when they're in a recruiting conversation or a sales process and they're getting a client, and they ask a great question. And then we try and use the same question and it doesn't land the same. We don't get the same result. You know why? Oftentimes, the reason oftentimes is you're asking the right question, but it's not at the right time. You can ask the best question in the world, but if it's not at the right time, you're not going to land the question. It's almost like, here's what I want to do. I want to give you the perfect gift. So I go on to Amazon and I order the perfect gift for you, but I deliver it to the wrong address. The gift does nothing for you at that point, right? And so we've got to first understand, how do I get myself in a state of certainty and how do I get myself in a state of clarity before I even begin the presentation, whatever presentation you're doing. These are the two most important states to have, because I've said this a thousand times. What sales really is, it's a transference of emotion. You're transferring your emotion to them. If you're super certain, you're transferring certainty to them. If you're super clear on what the path looks like, you're passing that clarity onto that. You're transferring it onto them, okay? So here's the first question I have for you. Let's go back to the other whiteboard, okay? What does it mean? I want you to write this down and I want you to think about it. What does it mean for you to feel certain? What does it mean for Nicole Murray to feel certain? What does it mean for Brooks Sternberg to feel certain? What does it mean for Stephanie Thornton to feel certain? What does it mean for Edson Trejo or Margie Hand to feel certain? What situations or what roles do you naturally feel super certain in? Brooks and I had a coaching call with this unbelievable couple in his business yesterday, in our business. And one of the things I was trying to do with the young lady was I was trying to get her to remember, I was trying to get her to associate, I was trying to get her to remember what it feels like when she feels super certain, when she's a confident, when she's achieving, when she's excelling. What does that feel like for her? What does it feel like for you? So what does it feel like for you to, what does it mean for you to feel certain? And if you can, in the chat room right now, what situations outside of WFG, what situations outside of WFG do you feel naturally super certain in? Like Christine Smith or Michael Paul, when they're on a basketball court, they have tons of certainty, right? We're certain in. Kyle Smith's a baller too. Isabel, my ministry, excellent. Where else? Where do you feel super certain? What's a role that you naturally feel super certain in? What's a situation that you feel super certain in? Okay, now here's the next step. I want you to put yourself in that role, in that situation where you feel super certain. Okay, everybody with me? This is really important. This is I'm giving you the shortcut, the hack here. Okay, what is your internal dialogue like when you feel super certain? What do you say to yourself in those situations? What do you say to yourself in those roles when you're feeling super certain? There's language that you say to yourself that gives you the feeling of certainty. What is the language that you say to yourself when you feel super certain, when you're in that role, when you're in that situation? I want you to write it down. I want you to capture your recipe for success. What is it that you say to yourself that causes you to feel really certain? Second question, what are you focused on when you have this feeling of certainty? What are you focused on when you have this feeling of certainty? What are the things, the experiences, the ideas, the people, what are the things that you're focused on that cause you to feel super certain? Write these things down in your notes. This is part of your recipe. Your recipe is unique to you. It's as unique as your DNA. It's as unique as your fingerprint. Your recipe works for you. You can't borrow Ed Milet's recipe. You can't borrow Dan Charlier's recipe. So what are the things that you say to yourself? What are the things that you focus on? I want you to describe the best that you can. What does it feel like when you're super certain? When you have this feeling of certainty, what does it feel like on the inside? Do your best to just describe in your notes right now. What do I feel like when I'm certain? What does it feel like when I'm really certain? Fourth question. What's my physiology like in those situations? What's my physiology like in those roles? Is there a certain way that I breathe? Is there a certain way that I sit or I stand? What's the positioning of my shoulders, of my chest, of my abdomen, of my head? Am I more upright? Are my shoulders back? Is my chest out? Is my breathing shallow or deep? I want you to put yourself in a state right now of complete certainty. Wherever, I don't care if you have to stand up, sit down, I don't care if you have to move your body. I want you to put yourself in a state right now where you feel completely certain. I want you to say to yourself the things that you say to yourself. I want you to focus in on the things that you focus in on. And I want you to move your body and your breath work in a way that gives you complete certainty, where you absolutely feel certain. And I want you to feel what that feels like in your body, in your being, in your spirit. What does it feel like? And if I could challenge you to do something for the next 30 days, it would be to spend 2 or 3 or 4 minutes putting yourself in a state of complete certainty. And how do I do that? I just did it. Here's the things I say to myself. I can see by the chat room, maybe for some of you, here's some of the things that I might say out loud. I might not just say them to myself internally. I might say them out loud to myself. Here's what I'm focused on. Here's how I'm moving my body. Here's how I'm breathing. And here's what it feels like when I feel completely certain. Look at ourselves, right? This is not a perfect representation of all of you, but this is for sure one of you. You know who this is, right? Okay. Here's what happens. Some of us have a state that is hardwired in our brains because we've done this so many times. We've done this emotion so many times called doubt or sorry, the chat just got in the way of my drawings, or worry. Okay, it looks like Homer Simpson. Or anxiety, or uncertainty, right? Or inadequacy. I'm just not good enough. And sometimes we have a state like this that we've done a whole bunch of times. Maybe we've done it in WFG. Maybe we've done it in prospecting. Maybe we've done it in appointments. And the more times we've ran this emotion or felt this emotion, the more it's hardwired in our brains. What I want to challenge you to do is to take this state of certainty that we've now addressed. What do I say to myself? What do I focus on? What do I say to myself? What do I focus on? How do I move my body? What do I say to myself? What do I focus on? How do I move my body? What do I say to myself? What do I focus on? How do I move my body? If you just every day, twice a day for 3 or 4 minutes, practiced what it feels like. Just put yourself in the state, put yourself in the role, put yourself in the situation where you already know how to feel certain, but rehearse it over and over and over. What we want to do is we want to activate this and make this so strong that we want to make it so easy that literally in a moment's notice, you could be cleaning up a dog mess, arguing with your spouse, like Amazon comes to the door, like in the midst of chaos, and literally in a moment's notice, switch on this feeling of certainty and jump onto a Zoom call. And immediately begin to take all of these other things that used to be a part of your presentation and get rid of them. If you've ever been to a Tony Robbins seminar, clarity and certainty are the two states that he gets himself in 4 primary states before any of his 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 day workshops where he's on stage literally 14, 16, 18, sometimes 20 hours a day, nonstop. How does he do the interventions that he does, like from the stage? How does he intervene with people who are suicidal or depressed or have all kinds of emotional trauma, PTSD? How does he get in there and override their emotions that, quite frankly, they're emotions that these are records in their mind that they've been playing over and over and over, and they've done them so many times. These things are hardwired and hard-grooved. How does he get in there and overcome them so quickly? There's 4 primary states he puts himself in before he starts any one of his events: certainty, clarity, connection, and curiosity. He's got to be able to connect with them. He's got to be insanely curious so that he can find out what's the cause, what's the trigger. And then he's got to provide so much certainty that his certainty overrides their doubt. So much clarity that they see clearly what to do next. And by the way, that's exactly what you're doing in your sales presentations. So here's the two questions. Once you've practiced how to get into certainty, here's the two questions that I want you to ask yourself. Number one, who am I when I feel totally certain and totally clear or super clear? Who am I when I feel totally certain? Who am I when I've got absolute clarity? By the way, those might be great affirmations to add to your, and now I'm not a fan of having 100 affirmations. I'm a fan of having 8 or 10 or 12. These might be great affirmations for you in the next 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks. But just as important as the affirmation is you taking the time to hardwire the feeling, getting yourself into that state, the internal language, the internal dialogue you have, what you're focused on, the physiology. And then number two, what do I have to offer? What do I have to offer this prospect? What do I have to offer this client? What do I have to offer this potential recruit? Ask yourself, who am I when I feel totally certain? Who am I when I feel totally clear? What do I have to offer these people? And get yourself in a state of certainty, of clarity, and of seeing all the value that you bring to the table, all the value that is Brooke Sternberg, all the value that is Stephanie Thornton, all the value that's Yvonne Paul, all the value that's Margie Hand. Who am I and what do I have to offer them? This is the sale before the sale. You've got to sell yourself on you. And this is the state that we put ourselves in. These are the questions that we ask ourselves. And this is where it begins. And then we start the appointment and we get into our sales process. If I was to break down the sales process and keep it super, super simple, what's the first question Uber asks you?
Where do you want to go?
Nope.
Uber? Oh. Where are you now?
Where are you now? Where
Okay.
are you now? Where are you now? And then for those who like to skip to the end of the course, what's the second question they ask you? You already said it, Nicole. Where do you want to go?
Where do you want to go?
Where do you want to go? This is the simplicity, really the psychology behind sales. Where's the client now? Where do they want to go? And what we want to create for them, here's what I want to help you to create. I want you to shift from pitching people. I want you to shift from looking at the one-page presentation as a pitch that you have to go through. And I want you to shift from pitch. Somebody's talking in the background. Nicole, if you can mute them, to a conversation. Why? Because there's two things that work here. As we're talking about states and state management, one is your state. The second state is whose?
Theirs.
Their state, the buyer state, the prospect state, right? And so you can put yourself in a state of certainty. You can put yourself in a state of clarity. You can put yourself in a state of connection, a state of curiosity. But when we start a pitch, usually because they've been pitched before, what kind of a state does that put them into? Oh, I'm being sold. That puts them into a defensive state oftentimes, or a reactionary, or a closed state. What kind of a state do we want them in? Yeah, resistance. Good, Lawrence. What kind of a state do we want them in?
Open, ready to
Open.
listen.
Open. Why? Because you can't close something that's not open. Write that in your notes. You can't close something that's not open. I've got to get them into an open state. How do I do that? By not giving them a pitch, but by introducing them to a conversation that opens them up. What's the other state I want them in? I want them in a state of trust, right? And I also want them in a state of action where they're willing to make decisions, take steps, right? So a couple more notes. How you start is how you finish. How you start is how you finish. What do I mean by that? There's three things that I think are really important to starting any appointment. When I say any appointment, I mean any appointment, okay? You want to have a to be conversational. I want to have call control. How many of you have ever had an appointment where you felt like you lost control, or where you felt like you had control, and the next thing you know, they're running down the rabbit hole and spinning out of control and on these long conversations, and you don't know what to do or how to do it or how to interrupt?
Baby boomer, and you got to shut them up.
There's a whole
I
lot
resemble that.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of people you got to shut up. Trust, right? So one of the things under call
Nicely.
control.
I'm sorry, Chris. Nicely. I meant.
Here's the thing: nicely or not nicely, like nicely, yes, but call control is you have to get better at jumping in, directing the call. You've got to get better at pace and control. So you've got to get better at jumping in and directing the call. That's not cutting them off necessarily. It's jumping in. Call control is also, I don't know why my whiteboard got so small. So jumping in, right? And directing or redirecting, as Lawrence said, the call. You've got to be in control of it, okay? Sometimes we feel like, oh, well, the more the buyer speaks, the better. Yes, we want them to be a part of the conversation, but we want to direct the conversation, okay? All conversation is not good conversation. We want it to be directed conversation that's going somewhere. By the way, they want it to go somewhere too, right? So another part of call control is the order of your questions. The order of your questions. As I said at the beginning of the call, you can ask the best question in the world. But if you ask it in the wrong order or at the wrong time, it's just not going to land right. If you haven't earned the right to ask that question, sometimes you'll push them away and get them back into reaction mode, get them back into pitch mode, even though it was a great question. And that's why you've got to master the sales process and master your scripting. Sometimes we've got all of these tools, we've got all these questions, but we don't have the order and the process right. We ask them in the wrong order. So how do we start out a conversation? Can I give you guys a simple question to put people in the where was the view all whiteboards? Can I give you guys a simple way to sort of create a conversation, whether it's the beginning of a one-on-one, the beginning of a one-page presentation, whatever it is? Can I give you guys sort of a simple way of looking at it, maybe getting it started? Yeah. So here's one way of doing it. For example, Nicole, great to meet you. This is really just a conversation where we'll ask each other some questions, and then if everything sounds good, doesn't that sound better than, okay, well, we've got this presentation and Nicole's going to do the first half and I'm going to do the second half. And then afterwards, we'll show you what your options are. What does that feel like? That feels like I'm pitching, I'm selling, and I've already got a preordained idea of what I want to do to you. Nicole, hey, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really excited about you joining us today. By the way, just before we get started, today is really a conversation. It's just a conversation where we'll get a chance to ask each other some questions and go over some ideas together. And if everything sounds good, maybe we can go over some options at the end. Does that sound okay to you, Nicole? Hey, and maybe a follow-up question might be like, hey, Nicole, what initially piqued your interest or caused you to set the appointment with Margie? What initially piqued your interest or caused you to set the appointment with Margie? Because a lot of times we start an appointment, we're like, oh, they're closed. They're only here because they have to be. They're only here because Margie asked them to be. But the fact of the matter is, they still showed up. They still showed up. Right? So part of them is curious. Part of them is open. Otherwise, they wouldn't be showing up in the first place. Does that make sense? So we want to create a sense of openness in the very beginning, okay? And you may even start out before that, like, hey, Nicole, hi, how are you? By the way, what part of the country are you in? Oh, that's awesome. Is that where your business is located or is that where you live? Oh, that's awesome. Now, based on what Margie's told you about us, what kind of initially brought you on the call, Nicole? Well, I just wanted to help out Margie, or I was curious about this, or I heard that. Great. Hey, Nicole, before we get started, really, I just want to have a conversation with you today where we can ask each other some questions. And then if everything sounds good, maybe we can go over some options at the end. Does that sound okay? Any questions so far? Any feedback? Anything to add so far?
Loving it.
Okay. Hey, Christopher, one thing, I appreciate everything that you're talking about. I've been having a little while, and I think the important part, along with when you're talking about the words and mastering it, is being able to be sold out yourself. The words a lot of time are really, really important because the words will create a picture.
Yep.
In somebody's mind, and so we have to first. We did this a couple of weeks ago on a Freedom Friday call where we did word association. Like if you said sales, what comes to mind? I did it with my team the other day. When you say people, what do you think about when you think about people? And we have to really be able to control our own thoughts when it comes to what we're talking about and the words that we're talking about. So then now, as you're presenting, like when you said, when I'm in a place of certainty, what goes through my mind? It's calmness. Like when I'm playing basketball, I'm in a space where I'm 100% certain, I'm calm. There's not a lot going through my mind.
Right.
But when I'm not certain, a million things are going through my mind. mind on the moment. And so to be able to take the time and go through everything that you're talking about and create that level of certainty first within you about your process and what you're doing in not allowing other people to define the service and everything that you're providing to people, it's easy to have that conversation because now you're not feeling defensive and feeling like you have to prove something or show something to somebody. It's like, hey, I'm just looking for people to be able to help. You know, who do you know that can benefit from this? And if we're looking at your own personal plan, man, I identify a couple of areas where I can be of service. Would you allow me to help you? You know, and they're like, well, yeah, sure, absolutely. And it's still selling, but it feels different. It's conversation, and they're part of that process.
Yeah, and Mike, you hit the nail on the head. A couple things. The first sale you got to make is you. You've got to sell you on you. You've got to get yourself in that state. And here's why we started there, Mike. I'm so glad that you brought this up. Here's why we started there. Too many times I'm new in the business, or too many times maybe I've been around a few years. I'm not necessarily new, but I'm not performing at the level that I want to. I'm not getting the results that I want to. And we create a limiting belief that says, I need all the experience of a Brooke Sternberg. I need all the success that Michael Paul has had. I need to have like the personality traits of a Nikki Cannon to get those kinds of results. And it's a limiting belief, and it's 100% not true. What Michael has in these calls, or Brooks or Nikki or others, is they have a state of certainty before they're getting into these calls. So what I want Aaron Rojo to know, right? Or what I want Julie D'Amato to know, or what I want Dee Williams to know is, or you already know what it feels like to feel that certain. You don't need years of experience. You don't need more training. You don't need more licenses to feel more. So you don't need a different title here. You don't need more years of experience to feel that level of certainty. You already know how to feel that level of certainty. And Tony Robbins talks about two things. One, there's affirmations, you know, when I tell myself these things. Two, there's incantations. And what I taught you at the beginning, without calling it incantations, is incantations, where you put yourself in a state of certainty. That's different than reading an affirmation. An affirmation, we're trying to change the internal audio track in our head, which is powerful. And we're trying to consciously create a new audio track. And we're saying that new audio track so many times, so many days in a row, to where it becomes internalized, where it becomes subconscious. It runs on autopilot. The second thing is the incantation. And that's where I go, I am certain. I am certain. And I say that word over and over on a daily basis. I am certain, until I feel what it feels like for me to be totally certain. And Aaron Rojo already knows how to feel totally certain. Jeanette Howard already knows what it feels like for her to feel totally certain, right? Alana Phillips already knows what it feels like for her to feel totally certain. Paula Whitehead already knows what it feels like for Paula to feel totally certain. Yeah. But when you say that over and over, I am certain, and you just say it, how many times do I have to say it, Schloeman? Until you get in that state where you feel totally certain. And what you're doing then is not hardwiring an audio track in your mind. You're hardwiring your feelings, you're hardwiring your emotions to get used to feeling certain. Some of us, when we get in a situation where we're under pressure, we automatically feel doubt. We automatically feel uncertainty. We automatically feel anxiety when we're in a situation that's filled with pressure. What I want to teach you is how just as quickly to go to a feeling of certainty under pressure. You're not going to, in a sales presentation, feel super confident or feel super certain if you haven't practiced that emotion in a non-pressure filled environment. You know, the great coaches in sports say, hey, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. How you practice is how you perform. And great coaches have an element of stress in their practices, right? So they start with no stress, no pressure as they're teaching a skill or running a play. and then they start out slowly, and then they increase the speed and increase the speed and increase the speed. Then they add artificial pressure to the situation in practice so that it becomes so ingrained. I immediately go to, I have certainty in this play. I've got confidence in this play. I know what to do. I don't even have to think my way through it. And what incantations do for us, if you just go, okay, what do I say to myself? What am I focused on? How do I move my body? I am certain. I am certain. And you keep saying it over and over until you, and by the way, you can do the same exercise once you get to a feeling of certainty with confidence. When you feel confidence in you, it should feel a little bit different than certainty. They're not the same feeling. They're not the same emotion. So sometimes we mistake just a feeling of like a rush of excitement where it's just like, I'm getting myself pumped up. And there's an inner quiet for Michael. He's not out. He's not exuberant. He's not out like this. So learning to sort of practice, how do I feel when I'm most certain? How do I feel when I'm most confident? And ingraining that and then practicing that on a daily basis. Nobody's going to know if you practice or not. Actually, everybody will know. And here's how everybody will know. When you do incantations and you begin to practice these states on a regular basis, 3 weeks from now, people that are really close to you, like a spouse, a child, a parent, people that see you every day are going to go, man, I don't know what's up with you, Kathy. You just seem so confident. I don't know what's going on with you. Chinema, you just seem like super certain. Like they'll literally say the words out loud that you've been affirming. They'll literally say the states out loud that you've been incanting, because when you do it consistently enough, it starts to just come out of your pores. It starts to shift the way you just are. It starts to shift the way that you be. And it becomes obvious. And all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, did they catch me doing my affirmations? Did they see me doing my incantations? Did they get into my journal somehow? You almost think like somehow, like they've done something unscrupulous to know this about you. But it just shows that this change that is taking place on the inside is starting to manifest itself on the outside. Brooks, your electronic hand is up. Is that intentional? Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I do. I'm glad you mentioned incantations, because that's been a key to our success, not just in business, but in many areas of my life. You know, and I remember when Mylett first brought that to us maybe 17 years ago from Tony Robbins, and it made a huge impact. Something else, you know, that helps me out, that may help the team here, is the question I want to add to this is, how do you get yourself centered? Right. I think a lot of times we're outcome driven. We want to recruit, we want a license, we want production, yes, we want points, we got to close because we got a trainee, we feel that pressure of we got to perform. And for me, it's getting centered, you know, my faith, you know, making sure I stop, I take a deep breath, I say my prayer. That's important to me, that I'm there to serve and help is a huge difference. You know, I also take some time and visualize through the appointment. Mm-hmm. The question I'll add to the team here today is, if you had no PowerPoint and you were on Zoom and you were closing today, could you close that appointment with no PowerPoint? So for some reason you got a 10,000 point case today, and you're ready to go, and your computer fries out, but you're not going to reschedule it. You have no other equipment. Could you get on Zoom and still go through that appointment and close that appointment without a visual? That's the state you should be in. You should be able to do that appointment, know every single screen, know every exact A to B to C, to be able to close that appointment without any visual. That's the level.
That's mastery. That's mastery. Yeah. You know the process. You know the order of things. That's mastery, Brooks. It's a great question. People buy states. So what state do people need to be in to make a buying decision? They need to be in a state where they're trusting you, right? So we've got the state that here's what I want you to get. The state that you're in matters. Number one, the state that your prospect is in matters. And you're like, before you're closing a sale, you've got to be getting your prospect into this right state so that you can close the sale. I want you to write this in your notes. All decisions are state dependent. All decisions are state dependent. What does that mean? You could follow the script exactly. You could use all the same words that Brooks uses and not get the same result. Why? Because you're not in the same state that he's in, and you're not getting your prospects in the state that they need to be in to make the decision. Christine, your electronic hand is up. Does that mean you want to share something?
Yes.
Please.
Just before you moved on, because
I love it when I got leaders that want to jump in and contribute. It just tells me that like we've got so much talent on board. It just helps to get the ideas across.
yeah, my AirPods have been acting up. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Yes.
Okay, good. So I just wanted to respectfully interrupt you right there, because I just want everybody to know how important that is. You know, I completely agree with what you said and what Brooks just said too, about how you get this certainty. And I just want to make sure everybody didn't miss the point about experience and just reps. You know, Mike used the example of like basketball. He's certain, you have a sense of calm because it's like you've seen it all before. You know what I mean? Like, I just remember when you're young and all of a sudden people want to press you in basketball, like, so they're
Right.
pressing and you're just like, ah, and then you blame others and like, why didn't you come to the ball? And, you know, there's always different things. And then, I mean, you just see like the older and older you get, no one really presses like that anymore, because
Right.
you can break it. The pressure isn't really there. I'm not going to turn the ball over. It's just like, all right, this is what I'm going to do, blah, blah, blah. And I just think when you've got
LeBron might, but you won't. You watch
Don't
the
get me
game.
started, Christopher, about these Lakers. But yeah, just when you've had all these reps, like what Brooks just mentioned, like if my computer went down, could I close it? I'm like, yeah, for sure. Because you've done it so many times, and it's more about where you can get the client. So to your point, yesterday I had a close, and I haven't met with these people in a long time. There's been a big gap between when I first met with them and the trainee, and now for a million reasons. But anyway, they're like, oh, we're ready to get started. They're engineers, super logical. The numbers need to make sense. And so I just start like, hey, how have you been? Blah, blah, blah. The guy's transitioning to real estate. The point is, I was like, how's it going? And he was like, it's actually great. I had a great April. And he was just kind of like moving on. And then I was like, this isn't going to close until I change his state. Because he was just like so cerebral, excitement, certainty, trust, all of that. And I was like, can you get excited? You just went full-time real estate. You made more in a month than what you made, in your job. Like that's a big deal. And they're like, you know what? It is. And I was like, can't you see your dreams coming true? And this and this. And it was just like telling the story and getting into it. And the trainee that was on with me was like, what made you think to do that? And I was like, I could just feel it. Like, you got to get them going, and then the stories about long-term care, and this is what it will do for you, and why, as opposed to just the numbers and the 1035 exchange, because that's what she thought we were going to spend a lot of time on. And once we just worked more on all the intangible stuff, they're like, yeah, that's just true. I'm ready to get this going. It was like most of the questions that they were focusing on at first just kind of went away. So I just wanted to say that, because that's such a key, important part. And for those that are maybe a little bit more focused more on like the tangible, I need to know what I'm doing and this number and that number, that's all important. But if you don't get the reps in, and if you don't understand the importance of someone being in their peak state, you still won't close.
Yes. And I just want to reiterate again, because the reps are important and the experience is important, but you can have the same level of certainty that Christine does and the same level of confidence that Christine does without having the reps. Do we want you to have the reps? Yes, but I don't want you to wait until you have as many reps as her to have her level of certainty and confidence, because it's not necessary, because you already know how to be as certain as she is. You already know how to be as confident as she is in other areas of your life. I want you to remind yourself of what that feels like when you're that certain, when you're that confident, and bring that to this, even if you don't have the experience yet, because that's going to help you to get better quality experiences right out of the gate. It'll help you to shorten the time frame it takes to get from you to Christine. Okay. So I want to sort of illustrate the sales process. Go ahead. Somebody said something, man.
It's excellent, Christopher.
Yeah.
If you want me to move forward, I'm not sure if you have a little.
No,
bit of
go
time,
ahead.
So I know everybody was talking about the state of the presenter. I know Christine touched on the state of the person listening, and I just wanted to go back to what you were saying, right? When the way you started the conversation with that opening question, like I looked at it from like, let me just listen and let me receive it as the person hearing it. And it just puts me at a state of ease the way you did it. Right. And that's so important in the presentation. Like when you start with somebody, hey, look, well, all we're doing today is having a conversation where we're going to ask each other some questions. That tells me from the beginning, it puts me at a state of ease that it's not a, you sit down, you listen, I talk. It's a,
I'm the authority.
Right. And so when I listen to your opening question, I always look at it, well, how would I receive it? Or how would someone else receive it? And it just put me at a state of ease to say, it's not a presentation. So it's not a, you sit and listen, I talk. It's a conversation where it's fluid. So it lets me know from the beginning, this is me and you. This isn't just me talking to you. And then the end, when you said, and in the way you said it, right? I want people to focus on the way you said, like my wife says it all the time. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Right.
Enough
And
about
so,
your personal life.
and so it's like, so it's the way there was a level of certainty with the way you spoke, but a calmness with it, right? Like it was just kind of like, hey, look, at the end, if everything sounds good, then we have some options and we'll go from there. It's kind of like a, hey, but if it's great, good. If it's not, it's not. It's kind of like a, I don't care which way it goes.
Correct.
After our conversation, if it sounds good, we have some options. If not, it's cool. It's kind of that very casual, but still a commanding direction of what's about to happen. And it's very big on the way I do things because the way you did it made me feel like, okay, cool. It just puts me at a state of ease as the listener, knowing that this is a mutual conversation, that it's not just you talking to me. And I just thought it was the tone, how it was said, and the psychology behind that. There's so much in there in that little question, but there's so much there. And I just thought I'd point that out because I thought it's a smart move to start it that way.
I'm glad you did. And how we start dictates how we're going to finish.
100%.
And so if we can start by setting the tone that this is a conversation, we're going to ask each other questions, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if things sort of go well, maybe we can discuss some options at the end. It is very neutral, but like you said, I'm giving direction. So I'm maintaining call control without having to pull like a big authoritarian play.
Right.
Going to be the authority, but it's not going to feel like I'm the authority.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when a person says like, oh, what are you going to sell me? And it's like, but when you start it that way, it's like, oh, it's just a conversation.
Or here's another one. Great questions. Like, well, what is it? What is it you want to achieve? What are your goals? Where do you want to get to? Great questions. But if I haven't earned the right to ask them yet, I'm not going to get very transparent answers.
100%.
I'm going to get very surfacey BS kind of answers, right? And so they're great questions, but they've got to be asked at the right time.
At the right time.
Yeah. So let me give you guys a really simple breakdown of the sales process. Okay, a really simple breakdown. Because today what I want to spend more is psychology sort of behind the scenes. And then maybe next week, we may spend more time on psychology next week. But in the next couple of weeks, then we're going to get really into the specifics of the sales steps, the questions, the scripting, and so forth. But I want you to understand sort of the 20,000 foot view, the understand the psychology behind it. Okay. Let me give you some simple questions to sort of illustrate what the sales process looks like. Okay. Step one in the sales process. Here's a simple question to sort of illustrate step one in the sales process. What's going on, Brooks? What's going on, Christine? What's going on, Edson? What's going on is what? The intro and rapport building. That's really what I'm asking. That's what I'm accomplishing with that question. What's going on? The second question, that once I've completed that step, the second step is digging into their problems is the second step. So what's a simple question that illustrates that? What's going wrong, or what's not going the way you want it to, Christine? What would you like to be different, Edson? Right? Those are simple questions that just sort of illustrate step two of what's the problem. What's not the way you would want it to be? Step three would be the solutions phase. What's a simple question? Where do you want to get to? Where do you want to go, Edson? Where would you like to be 6 months from now, Nicole? How would you like things to be different a year from now, Stephanie? Those are simple questions that sort of lead us to solutions, right? The fourth step is the consequence step. What happens, Christine, if 6 months from now you're still in the same place that you are today? What happens, Edson, if things don't change for you? What happens if business, Nicole, just continues to sort of be up and down, sort of randomly every month? What happens if you don't if your income doesn't grow over the next 6 months and inflation continues the way you tell me it's going to, and the recession starts the way you're telling me it's going to? What happens if you're not more financially prepared for those things? What happens if you're not able to really grow into the kind of leader that you need to be for your team and really set the pace and set the example? And so those are simple questions that are consequence questions. The importance of consequence questions is that they create ownership and urgency. In other words, what happens if things don't change 6 months from now, Christine? She feels like the ownership of like, and the urgency, like, no, things have to change. They have to be different in 6 months. What do I have to do, right? It really prevents sort of that let me think about attitude from happening when we ask good consequence questions. Hey, what are you going to do, Christine, if a year goes by and things get worse, not better? Like sitting here today, is there any guarantees that you have that things will be better? Is that a future that you're willing to accept? But here's the deal. Once again, I'm going to go back to the point I made earlier. Consequence questions only work if you ask at the right time. If you've established and earned the right to ask. Consequence questions only work if you've already identified the problem with them and if you've already identified the solution. If you're asking consequence questions and you haven't, the problem isn't clear to them and the solution isn't clear to them, then consequence questions aren't going to land right. They're going to probably push the prospect back into reaction mode, defensive mode, don't trust mode. This is a sales presentation mode. But at the right time, when the problem's been identified and Christine really wants to solve the problem, and then we've identified solutions, then we can move on from there. Like, where do you want to go from here? Would you like me to share with you like how our program or how the product might be able to create that solution that you're looking for? So at the point where we're getting into really a showing our product, showing our service, showing what the opportunity looks like to be in business with us, at that point, they should already be closed. You shouldn't be going into a presentation of an IUL, of an indexed annuity. You shouldn't be going into a presentation of how to onboard in an AMA and the opportunity with us if they're not already closed. Well, how do I know if they're already closed, Brooks? Because the problem is so big in their mind and the solution was so bright and the cost of inaction was so high. Those three things need to take place before we're showing them a product, a service, the opportunity. The problem in their mind needs to be so big, the solution so bright, and the cost of inaction is so high. Because who am I? I'm a bridge that gets them over that gap from their problem to their solution. What is my IU illustration? It's a bridge that gets them from the problem they're currently experiencing to the solution that is so bright that they want so badly. And the cost of not getting on that bridge today is too great. The cost of waiting another year is too great. I've got to have established all three of those before I begin to present it. They should already know that they want and need to make a change. They should already know that they want to make a change. They should already know that they need to make a change. Sometimes we're going into great closing sequences and asking great closing questions. Sometimes we have unbelievable illustrations to show them. And the problem just doesn't seem that big to them yet. And the solution just isn't that bright to them yet. And the cost of inaction really isn't that big of a deal to them yet. And so it doesn't matter how great the illustration is. It doesn't matter how great the closing sequence of the illustration is, because we just haven't gotten them there yet. When we're sort of at that stage of presenting the illustration or presenting the opportunity, it's almost like, here's what we have, Christine, and the consequences of you choosing this is you getting the future that you really want, eliminating all the pain that you currently have, and giving you all the pleasure that you desire. That's a real generic way of packaging any one of our presentation of a solution, right? It's, here's what we have now, Christine, and the consequences of you choosing this is that you get the future that you really want. It's going to eliminate all the pain that you're feeling, and it's going to give you all the pleasures that you really desire. And they're ready. They're all ready to move forward. They're wanting you to present an illustration. They're wanting you to show them the opportunity at this point. Why? Because their pain point is so big. Can I tell you something that oftentimes happens? And I'm going to ask for some feedback. When you start getting in this problem stage and start getting around their pain point, they're typically going to get into an avoidance mechanism. People don't like to talk about their pain points. And they typically are going to avoid talking about their pain points, and that's why they still have the problem. And so we've got to get really good and we're going to work on this in the next couple of weeks. We've got to get really good at helping them to understand their problem and helping them to see their problem and identify the problem and helping to make the problem bigger for them in a way that's not punitive. We're not shaming them in any way. We're just helping them to get clarity on the problem. And then clarity on what the future looks like when the problem is already resolved. Questions, ideas, feedback. I don't want to go much deeper than that today. So I'd like some, any feedback, anything that any of you want to add.
Christopher, this is Kathy. I'm going to regress a few minutes and
please
and go back to when we were meeting people in their homes, and I would pick up, like Christine was talking about, the energy that the people would have. And I'm sitting at the kitchen table and I could tell the anxiety that they feel like they're gonna be sold something. Mm-hmm. And what I would do is I would just cut to the chase, and I would say to the lady, I would say, can you tell me where your purse is? And immediately the other fear that comes on their face, and I go, where's your purse? And what I want you to do is, wherever it is, go put it in your bedroom and come back and close the door, because you're not going to buy anything today. And once I say that, I get that out the room, that you're not buying anything, then I can have your attention on the conversation.
Yeah. And then you have Nicole Murray go around to the bedroom window while you're in the middle of the presentation. Oh, I'm messing.
Yeah. But immediately I say, you're not buying anything today. But they're not hearing today, because you will be buying something. So, but I noticed that, and I just go ahead and take that white elephant out the room.
It's super important. Super important.
So you're reviewing with them, like, okay, what about this? What about this? And it sounds like they're saying all the right things, doing all this, but sometimes it's probably more of these intangibles you've identified, like maybe they weren't in the right order, or maybe you didn't have permission yet to now give this consequence scenario. So I think it was helpful too, from us on a coaching standpoint, is that sometimes we should be identifying more of these things that could be holding our teammates back.
Yeah.
Can I give you one more little nugget along those lines, Christine, that just something for those of you that are field trainers to begin to pay maybe a little bit different attention to? So a lot of times early in the call, when we're past the introduction, past the report building, we're in the sort of the problem stage, and we're asking questions and trying to understand the need, understand the problem, trying to define it, and then trying to make it, and trying to really create that gap, if you will. So oftentimes we'll ask a question like, can you tell me about things you've tried in the past? Or can you tell me, have you worked with an agent or an advisor in the past? Can you tell me about other times maybe that you've considered purchasing insurance or investments, right? That's a common kind of question that we'll ask when we're sort of fact finding. A good secondary question to that might be like, well, what benefits did you get by meeting with that agent? Or what benefits did you get from working with that advisor? Or what benefits did you get from that insurance policy or that investment? Walk me through sort of what you liked about it, what you liked about the experience, what you liked about working with that advisor. And these are common questions that we ask. And some of us ask these secondary questions, but one of the things to pay attention to are, what are the key words that they use in describing what they liked about the past experiences? What are the key words that they use when they're saying, here's what I liked about the advisor, here's what I liked about the agent, here's what I liked about the product? What are the words that they use? Because we're going to want to make a note of those words and then use them later when we get into the solution. We're going to want to use the words that are going to magnify the experience that they've already had that they've liked. And then the second part of the other side of that coin, obviously, is, well, obviously, obviously, the advisor wasn't the perfect advisor for you, or you'd still be with them, or you'd be talking to them on a regular basis. Or, you know, you would have talked to them in the past 5 years, right? Or obviously that wasn't the ideal product for you, or we wouldn't be looking at possibly replacing it at this time, right? So as they're describing what didn't work, or why that relationship ended, or why that product's no longer working, once again, look for the words that they use to describe what caused them to stop or not feel great about that product or solution anymore, because we're going to want both sets of words when we come to the solution stage.
Hey, Christopher, to add to that, I had a client yesterday
Please.
that I sat with, and the husband got the plan and the solutions. The wife was a little hesitant. It was a IUL LTC plan, and he totally got it. And she was a little hesitant. Like, well, he's the breadwinner. I stay at home. Kind of like, I don't really need it. I don't see the value of it. I want to enjoy our lives and spend our money here. I don't know, 10, 12,000 point case. And one of the things along the way that he said is, he says, you know, because she's like, well, I want to, you know, be in a facility, if you know, like, and she started talking about his mother-in-law, like, she's this beautiful facility. And then it circled back around, and he used the word options. He says, what with that monthly long-term care money, Kristen, gives us options, right? And he mentioned that. And so sure enough, later on, I'm like, hey, Kristen, as your husband was, as Brandon was saying earlier, this allows you the options for you to have your choices and have total control. So you can have that option to be in a facility like your mother-in-law, or have your choice. Hey, if you want to jump on a cruise ship with $20,000 a month, you can do that if you want, right? And so I used his language back. The last comment I want to give here,
advanced level stuff,
yeah.
and that's why you're getting results that you're getting. Excellent.
All right, thanks, man. The last thing that I want to share with you, I was looking at my notes as we went through the exercise today, the questions about, you know, my certainty and my clarity and all this that I'm writing down, and there's certainly, I left a lot of blank lines to go back and fill stuff in to continue the exercise. And the word that kept popping up in my notes here is serving, or servants. And I think if we change our state and we change our advisor, a servant person, I think it changes your internal dialogue and incantations and the beliefs that you're hardwiring in yourself, that you're there to serve. And the thing that we've all heard before in the past is that, you know, in our lifetime, we have so many people that are going to impact us. You know, for most of us, it's a pastor or spiritual leader, maybe a teacher or a coach, right? A doctor, right? Or doctors, right? These are significant people. Why do these type of people impact you in your life? Because they're at a pivotal point in your life. And I come to the table like I'm one of those top 5 people in someone's life. And so if I'm on a Zoom or I'm at the kitchen table, I already know that my mind, I know that my heart, I'm there to serve. And so I'm assuming I'm the doctor that's going to save their life. I'm assuming I'm the pastor who's going to lead them to Jesus Christ. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's just my belief system's wired that way. And so so it makes it a lot easier where I don't feel like I'm handling objections. I'm just having a conversation, find out where they're at. How can I help? And I love the word you use, bridge, because I use that example all the time. I'm always the bridge of where they're at and where they need to go. And so I got to lay that bridge for them to be able to walk over that bridge. So
That's a couple of points. Great. That's excellent, Brooke. So a couple of things. One, I want you to write this in your notes as we're sort of wrapping up the call today. The best form of persuasion is persuasion. The best form of persuasion is persuasion. In other words, it's not overcoming the objection. It's creating the situation, the environment, the conversation up front where the objection never comes up. And that's what a pro does. A pro is going to take, I'm going to take the sales process and the end result that I want, and I'm going to work that backwards to get to the starting point of how do I start And it's not by me being an authority and not letting them talk and bully over them and ignoring it anytime they bring up a question. It's me putting them in the right state, putting myself in the right state, taking things in an order and understanding when I've got this step done and it's okay to move to the next step, when I've got the problem identified and when the problem is big enough, when I've got what the solution looks like to them, what it feels like to them, and that future is bright enough, right? When I've got the cost of inaction, the consequences that are so high that they're not willing to wait another moment before they move forward. And then I get into presenting my product or service or my opportunity. And then it's a wrap, because by that time they already know that they need to and want to move forward. And so the best form of persuading them is persuasion, where I get these things done in order, in the right way in advance, and I don't move on to the next step until the current step I'm on, I know that they're where they need to be. Okay. And what Brooks said, what Brooks has done for years is what I was describing to you earlier that Tony Robbins does before he gets on stage. He knows who he is and he knows the value that he brings to the table. You don't need to be here 20 years. You don't need to be here 5 years. You don't need to be here 1 year. Know who you are and the value that you bring. There's a level of certainty and confidence that you already know what certainty and confidence feels like. And certainty and confidence is not experiential. I want you to understand that. Certainty and confidence are just simply emotions. And you've got a full range of emotions that are completely at your access at any time. So you don't have to wait till you have a certain license or a certain title or a certain number of years here or anything like that before you can feel just as certain and just as much confidence as Brooks feels about who you are and the value that you're going to bring to this relationship and this conversation. That's critical for about 90% of you on this call. It's the most important thing to take away from this call is you practicing and being able in a quicker and quicker time frame, in a moment's notice, to be able to get yourself in a state of certainty, of clarity, of confidence. I know I'm bringing tremendous value, and I know that I'll be able to handle whatever it is I need to handle. Why? Because I'm focused on what I need to be focused on. I'm not focused on, well, what if they ask me this, or what if they ask me that, or what if I don't know? That kind of focus is going to create uncertainty, doubt, and anxiety and worry in you. I'm focused on, hey, I may not have all the answers, but I've got access to all the answers. I know a Nikki Cannon. I know a Stephanie Hicks. I know an April Newborn. Like, I know how to get the answers that I need. So I'm confident that I am bringing tremendous value, and I've got behind me the people, the team, the resources, the company to make a real difference in this person's life, even though I've only been here 6 weeks. You engaging that level of certainty and confidence is something that you can practice and rehearse, and you can have in a moment's notice. What I want the newest person on the call to be able to do is to be able to access Stephanie Hicks' level of confidence and certainty in the next couple of weeks in their career with us. because they already know what that feels like, and they're able to put themselves in that state before every appointment and throughout each appointment. All right.
Amen.
Yeah. A to the man for sure.
Yeah.
Any other leaders want to sort of close it out for us? I'm done.
Yeah.
Hey, before you go, before the real leaders get on, the big time leaders, I'd just like to express my appreciation for you making a niche, for this right here. This is bringing so much value because I can't express to you how important it is, the certainty and the confidence that's necessary to be able to speak to people's situations, even though you may not have their situation, but knowing that you have the answer to get them to where they want to go, that's priceless. And
Yes.
to know the sales process, first of all, to know that there is a sales process. I don't think more than 1% of the people that come into our business knows that there is a sales process.
Very true.
There's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They think that you just come in and you just sell something. And so this is going to be the differentiating factor that will take us and put us on that Dave Busheri level where he's doing like 4,000, points production, per license. That's crazy.
Yeah.
With a 95%, persistency rate. That's crazy. But that's what I think this is going to do for us.
I believe you're right. I believe you're right. Lawrence,
Yes, sir.
what level of certainty and confidence do you have when somebody sits down in your chair?
Man, it's like, what you need, dude? No, you ain't even got to tell me. I know what you need.
Does anybody ever sit in the chair and you go, oh man, this person is way too high identity, or I don't know that I'm ready for this one, or never, right?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And so regardless of the market that you're in or the income or the net worth of the client, I want you to borrow that same certainty and confidence in those situations.
I just got you talking to a guy just now while we were on this call. He's worth over 100 million, and we're working on getting him into the Premium Alliance thing. We've already sat with him once, and so he just walked in the shop just now.
Praise God.
Yeah,
you're just the man to help.
Serendipity. That's it.
Yeah, and I'm just the man to override the man that helped him.
Yeah. Can I just say something before I go? Because I have an appointment now.
Yes.
I want to encourage those who are very new like me, not to be afraid of nothing. I mean, I've been out there in the business world for 17 years or thereabouts. I mean, selling real things, that exploded. And then you got here, everything is new. And you are like, how am I going to handle this? I just want you to know that you can't sell what you don't know. So calm down, sit down, come to meetings, learn, master it. What you master is you. You don't have to talk like every other person, but when you understand, the ethics, you take control of it and then you make it your own. And because you will always bring who you are to any environment, but you can't sell what you don't know. And talking to people out there, I noticed that people, even me, when they approached me on this, I was like, hey, you want to sell insurance to me? Or you want to make me an insurance agent? That was the first thing. But they got in and got me through education. So I start talking to people by letting them know that I'm not selling anything to you. By the way, I want you to know that everybody want to know. The whole world is seeking for knowledge. Okay. And I tell them, hey, I'm not selling anything to you, but you need to know what I got to know and that changed me. And once you say that, everybody's in seek of one knowledge or the other. But before you sell knowledge, you also have to master what you want to sell, because you might come confidently, you want to sell something or educate someone, and you don't have proper information, it will wreck the whole thing. So for me, this is a very good something to learn this morning that you dished out. Thank you so much, but I gotta run right now because I have an appointment. God bless you. I love you too. Bye.
Thanks for sharing. And once again, an easy way to create that environment with your prospect is to just start out by, hey, I'm excited to meet with you, Alicia. We're just gonna have a conversation today, and we're gonna ask each other some questions. And if things go well, maybe at the end we can explore some different options. Does that sound comfortable to you? And so we're having a conversation, we're asking each other questions, and immediately you're positioning yourself different than any other salesperson, any other agent, any other advisor has ever positioned themselves. You're showing up differently, and you're going to meet a different prospect, and a prospect that's more willing to be transparent, a prospect that's more willing to share and answer your questions and be led. Anybody else want to add something before we land the